This is the Medical College of Wisconsin's Oral History Project. I'm Dick Katchke, the Chief Historian. Today is September 21st, 2016, and we're talking with Judy Radtke. And Judy Radtke is the Operations Manager for the Star Center here at MCW. Thank you for taking time, Judy.
Oh, my pleasure, Dick.
Well, Judy, let's talk. Before you came to MCW, what prepared you? What is your background that led to you coming to MCW?
Interesting question. I was hired initially not as the manager of the Star Center, but as the simulation specialist. So I was the person who was hired to push the buttons on our $250,000 mannequin. And really, there was nobody who was specifically trained to do that. So they were having a hard time finding somebody. My background is as a speech pathologist. I also did work in education at a fine arts center, Sharon Linwell Center for the Arts, as a manager, education manager. And I'm fairly proficient with computers, understanding software. So the powers that be here looked at those skill set combinations and figured out that this would work for this position they were having trouble filling. And it's been quite a ride. I loved working in the simulator, and such a learning opportunity in so many areas that I was just vaguely aware of before I had an opportunity to delve into it. So it's been a blessing.
Now, Judy, this would have been back in about 2006.
Yes.
Who were the people that you interviewed with at that time? What were your impressions of MCW when you first came and interviewed for this position?
Sure. Well, I'm sure like most interviewees, when you walk up to that very imposing entrance, past the stainless sculpture and into this large building, this huge institution with so much history, it takes you back. But I had a very well-organized interview. I actually interviewed with 4 different people. I interviewed with Dr. Deborah Simpson, who was the head of educational services at that time, with Dr. Ken Simons, who was the senior associate dean for academic affairs. I interviewed with Dr. Phil Redlick, who was the dean of curriculum, and then with Aaron Delcourt, who was at that time the standardized patient coordinator, who oversaw what was happening in the Star Center.
Mm-hmm. And what were your impressions, of the position, of the opportunity, of the institution?
Right. Well, I had done some research before I had this position, because simulation was something that was not, frankly, on my radar, and was a bit intimidated by the kind of skill set I needed, to have the competency in understanding physiology and then the very complex programming that needed to run this simulator. So it took me back a bit. But the excitement of realizing that I was on the cutting edge of something that was so innovative in terms of medical education. And trust me, it's been a tsunami of a ride. From the time I came in the door, it was really obvious that this was an institution that really invested itself in some brand new technology, because it had the foresight to see that this was a direction we needed to go. This was a resource that we needed to provide for the medical students and others, externals, residency and fellowship programs, nurses, other allied health people, and that vision that they painted for me indeed has come to fruition, and then some. So I think that they did there was some very thoughtful ideas that went into the plan of this place, and we've added to it as our program has grown, but it's ambitious, and I feel really fortunate to be part of it.
Now, some people may not know what the Star Center is, and there are really 2 different components, if I'm correct.
Exactly.
One is the standardized patients, working with actors that are portraying the patients, and then the other is the models, the simulators themselves.
Yes.
And so, are there any other components, or are those the two primary?
Those are the 2 primary ones, but and most simulation centers, by the way, do not combine those in one venue.
Oh, really?
If you look at other institutions, often they'll have a separate space for clinical exams, skills with standardized patient actors, and a different space for the simulators, the task trainers, the plastic bodies and parts of plastic bodies. But here we have them in one location, which really gives us unique opportunities. So very often we combine both. For example, tomorrow we're having an OSCE, an examination with surgery residents, and into that we're incorporating simulation. When it's time for them to auscultate, they won't be auscultating the patient because the patient's not going to have positive signs. They'll be talking and doing the physical examination to the patient to a point, and then actually listening to the simulator. We call that hybrid simulation. And same thing too, we have put our standardized patients into hospital beds, and there'll be a vital sign with information that this patient is becoming tachycardic and hypotensive and bad things are happening. Well, it's not really happening to the actor.
Yeah.
It's happening because of the trick of simulation, and this hybrid environment allows us to pull these things together.
Now, when you first started, the Star Center, as we know it now, in 2016, didn't exist.
That's right.
Where were things located at that point, and what was the state of affairs?
Well, the Star Center physically was in location at what was then the north end of the Mutz.
Okay.
It had newly opened. I joined the Medical College of Wisconsin February 1st, 2006, and it actually opened the doors late winter, say end of November into spring. So it just opened up the facility. Before there was a Star Center, the things what we're doing with the standardized patients were all over this campus. They'd find spare clinical rooms in Freighter or in Children's, and basically wherever they could get a couple of rooms together with some patient actors and some students with handheld cameras, that was the space that was used. So that's for the standardized patient part. And then as far as simulators, there really wasn't a simulator program for the medical students per se. Again, throughout the campus there were little pieces of simulators located here and there, task trainers, but no one combined center where the students could come in on a regular basis. It was pretty much, pack things up and move them to different locations.
Now, with the opening of the Star Center, the facilities themselves were designed so that they would look like a regular patient examination room, but you have cameras and monitors and all that are really sort of out of sight so that it doesn't intrude as the student is interacting with the standardized patient. Is that correct?
It's really chock full of technology that is as much as possible hidden from the eyes of the trainee, because we don't want it to interfere with the flow of the scenarios or with whatever training is happening in that room. So again, the people who went to the design of this were very thoughtful in selecting a vendor that could incorporate the technology in such a way that we could obtain from our evaluations information we needed without letting it intrude into our space. So there's a lot that happens behind the scene. We have a data closet, and we have a relationship essentially with 3 different vendors. Our own MCW IS system that is responsible for the network and all the hardware, an AV company that does all the monitors and all the cameras, and then Beeline, which is another name I'm going to throw in here, which runs the software that captures all the information and packages it and help us to create an exam flow, and then again pull up these records so that the faculty can evaluate them. It's a terribly complex system.
Now, as you select individuals to be standardized patients, first of all, how many standardized patients do we have? And what are you looking for? Are you looking for a mix of age and gender and race and everything? How do you go about looking for standardized patients, and what are your expectations of them?
Well, that's a really good question. We have among our staff one person, her name is Deborah Amos. She's the standardized patient coordinator, and it's her job to basically solve that problem. We have at this time about 90 standardized patients. They all are MCW employees, by the way. The policy changed about 2 years ago, and from just being casual employees, they're now MCW employees, albeit for very broken pieces of time. So we recruit them specifically to fill different demographic needs for the case. We have OSCEs, these examinations with standardized patients that may be that we need to cast somebody who's between 30 and 50, a female, slender build, because the case particulars are represented by that kind of patient. So we have a large number of patients. Sometimes it's challenging. We can't have 30 guys who are 44 years old. So, we work with faculty to try and make sure that our demographics are broad enough to cover, and the faculty on their end work with us to make sure that their expectations are realistic given the pool of SPs we have.
Now, you have some challenge getting children, for instance.
Right. So we have some wonderful families that have their children become standardized patients. For the most part, they are homeschooled families. The reason being is that we have access to them during the day when most
flexible
of our exams,
schedules.
Exactly. And also a lot of these parents really see this as an educational opportunity for their own kids. So I've seen one, for example, one little boy who came in when he was 5 years old. He's now 14 years old, and just seeing him grow through these changes, and just very curious mind, and now how he's applying it, and interestingly enough has an interest in medicine. So
Very interesting.
another constituency that we make a very pointed attempt to recruit is for diversity. We want to make sure that not everybody that they see is a female, and middle-aged female, but that we have young people and old people, different body types, and also patients who are African American and Hispanic and whatever kind of group that needs to be represented, so that our cases really accurately portray the type of patients that our medical students and residents are going to encounter.
Now, you require that your standardized patients have to do some homework before
Absolutely.
they interact with our students then as well,
Right.
correct?
That's right.
Why is that, and what is it that they have to do?
It's critically important, because we don't just hand them a script that they memorize. They are not talking about their own personal medical histories. They're doing a case. So, for example, on any given OSCE, we might have 12 rooms running, and there might be 3 people doing Mr. Williams, all kind of the same physical characteristics and demographic. But what's interesting about OSCEs is that there's a very improvisational nature about it. The medical students will ask questions. If they miss an important question, the standardized patient has to know not to provide it for them, or how much information could be provided. And so this is a very interesting skill to have, to understand the through line of a case and who you're supposed to be and what to disclose and when. So we really make every attempt to have these SPs very well trained, so that we have the most reliability and fidelity in portraying their patients.
So do you do training then for these standardized patients before they actually interact with our students?
Right, absolutely. In fact, there was training going on this morning for this OSCE that I talked about. And I don't do it personally. That's our standardized
Sure.
patient coordinator. And she has really made a point of focusing on quality assurance. So it's not just that when the students finish their OSCE, they get feedback. Well, how did we do? We give the standardized patients feedback to how did they do. So that, for example, if they varied from the script.
Yes, I mean that could affect the quality of the education for the students. If
Quality
there's-
education and the grade. So it's a very sensitive type of training we need to do, and keep on refreshing to make sure that everybody is on the same page with this.
Now, one of the interesting things is that after the Milwaukee Repertory Theater, MCW Star Center is the second largest employer of actors in the Metro Milwaukee area.
Yes, it is. Yes,
And
it is.
So you have a reputation among the actors then too, as
We
a
do.
place
We
that
do.
people want to participate. So you actually have some professional and almost professional actors that are working with you then as well, correct?
Absolutely. We do certainly have professional actors who are seen on the stage. In fact, there's a bulletin board in our SP lounge where they can post what next show they're in. But it's not exclusively professional actors.
Yes.
We have a lot of people coming in, as long as they have the competency to deliver what we need them to deliver as standardized patients, we hire them. So there'll be people who are formerly worked in the medical profession as nurses or physicians. We have a number of those who are standardized patients. Word of mouth gets around, and then there's a process where we actually vet them, and they vet us to see if it's a good fit, and until they're hired.
Now, when a student is interacting with a standardized patient, it's being videotaped, and then after the encounter, after the session, do you play back the videotape? Are students then able to see what went right and what went wrong?
We do videotape almost every encounter that we have, but it's dependent upon the student's schedule and upon the faculty. Basically, it's curriculum that drives the need to do this. The opportunity is always there, and there are some courses in which the students do come back and view their videos. It's always pretty enlightening, because the students have an objective. When they go into that room, they have some idea what they're going to encounter, because they have their door note and there's things they want to cover. But it's not till they come back and view the video where they really understand what was deliverable and what they succeeded with. Because a lot of time people's intentions are different than what happens. You in the middle of a case, you forget that question that you're going to ask and it never gets covered, and so you're missing a critical piece of information. And again, that can happen in real life too.
That's right.
So these OSCEs give those students an opportunity to practice that. And again, when they do have the opportunity to view their videos, it reinforces that point.
And this is really important because by having these interactions before the student actually interacts with real patients, they are prepared. There's a comfort level that exists, and so they are in a better position to really interact and have a better learning experience with real patients.
Exactly, right. Because you can put patients at risk not only when you have a long spinal needle in your hand and you're going at a patient as a novice for the first time, but also when you're delivering some information to them. So using the OSCEs as a way of fine-tuning those communication skills, that bedside manner, so if eventually down the road as a practitioner they have some information they need to deliver to a patient, as inevitably they will, they've already kind of rehearsed through some of that word finding. We have some really interesting cases, for example, in palliative medicine, where it's a really high stakes scenario in which there's very bad news that needs to be delivered, and we want to make sure that we have equipped those medical students and residents and fellows with the opportunity to do that word finding when the stakes aren't as high.
Now, you mentioned residents and fellows as well, so it's not just early stage medical education where the standardized patients come into play. Actually, in residency training programs and in fellowship training, what is it different? Is it far more advanced in terms of the interactions that you're looking at this point, or what?
Sure. Well, just to kind of talk a little bit more globally, we do more things with procedural trainers and the mannequins with the residents and fellows, but we do a fair amount of the OSCEs with standardized patients. And yes, when we have an M1 student and they're having an encounter with standardized patient, it's going to be pretty basic. By the time they get to be residents and fellows, we'll put red herrings in the case, make a lot of complexity, maybe some cultural diversity issues that might be obscuring some of the delivery of information, in which case they have to delve in deeper, and we expect them, they'll have more competency, so we make the cases stretch them a bit.
Now, do you also get into the language that's used? One of the challenges that we encounter in medicine and science is that the more education people receive, the more technical the language is that they use. And how do you help people understand you've got to use a nickel word rather than a $25 word?
Right. No, really important concept, and probably using standardized patients is one of the best ways to train that skill. Well, the standardized patients give our students feedback, and that's one of the things that will typically come out. I believe it's, on most of our checklists that they use, that's an item that is specifically called out. Do they use a lot of jargon? Do they give me good eye contact? Do they reiterate something in a way I can understand it? So they're actually graded on that, and then that comes back to them in the way of comment if there's too much jargon-laced medical terminology in any encounter.
Now, the other component, of course, of the Star Center are the pieces of equipment, the mannequins that you use. And how did you gain experience in understanding how to use this technology? It's pretty challenging because these mannequins can be very, very complex.
Right, and it's not just the mannequins. Besides the mannequins, there's our whole infrastructure. Again, with our Beeline system and all the AV, when something is not working, where is the breakdown? Because all these are intersecting kind of systems. The way I learned it, jump in with both feet. When I was hired to run our high-fidelity simulator, STAN, it's an HPS, human patient simulator, that at that point had been used previously in the anesthesiology department, and we inherited him. Very complex simulator with a very big manual, which I proceeded to read from page to page, and then practice, and try different scenarios and what does this button do kind of thing. So that was one piece of it, the technical piece of it. The other component that I personally needed to learn was the clinical part of it. I didn't have that kind of background as a speech pathologist. These were things that I didn't delve into. So I started going to medical student classes and sat at the back of the room and was basically auditing to understand physiology so that when I had to do systemic vascular resistance as a parameter to make the simulator do something, I had conceptual knowledge of what that was and why it worked the way it did. So there was, trust me, a very steep learning curve. I'm happy that when I was first hired in February 1st, 2006, that it took a while for use to ramp up, because I needed every single minute of that time to get up to speed on it.
Now, before we talked about Deb Simpson, Dr. Ken Simons, some of the others that you met with that worked with you initially, but you also mentioned that Stan was part of the anesthesiology department.
Sure.
And Dr. John Campine was the chair, I believe, of the Department of Anesthesiology at that point. How did anesthesiology and Dr. Campine work with you to help get this set up?
Well, this is a really interesting story, because there basically were two parallel paths. While the Medical College of Wisconsin task force was looking into simulation centers, concurrently, and actually before that, the anesthesiology department had actually purchased a simulator. So at some point those crossed, and this is how it happened. Dr. Campine was really the champion. Back in 2001, when simulation was not nearly as pervasive in medical education as it is now, as integrated as well as it is now, he saw it. He saw it on the horizon. So what he did is he, within his own department, anesthesiology, championed the purchase of a high-fidelity human patient simulator, an HPS, otherwise known as STAN. And this is a $250,000 simulator, so you can imagine it took a fair amount of work on his part to let the powers that be understand the value of this tool. So the technology back then was a little bit more rudimentary, but it still was expensive, and it was very powerful technology. But at the time, they were running their scenarios in the basement of Fredert on the way to Children's Hospital in a former closet. So they had brought in residents, nurses for scenarios. They brought in medical students, but it was very inadequate venue for this. So that was 2001. I've got some notes here.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So, and that was a pretty active program through 2005. But then in 2003, Dr. Campine started more discussions with the anesthesiology department about finding a better space for the HPS, because they just couldn't keep doing it in this closet.
Yeah.
That didn't fit the people, let alone all the equipment, the anesthesia machine and the ventilator and all the other clinical equipment. So that conversation is going on. Concurrently, MCW administration is looking at the simulation space. So, obviously they start talking with each other, and that's how this evolved. So as far as the STAR Center itself, in early 2002, there was an MCW Education Planning Task Force that started. And I mentioned a couple of the people on it, Dr. Simpson, Dr. Simons, Dr. Radtke, I think Dr. Mark Dante was on it, and some others, and started looking at the need for a space. So, and by the reason that it was identified as a need is because there's something called the USMLE Step 2 Clinical Skills Test. Basically, it's standardized patient OSCE, and every medical student has to take and pass this test. So this test was a benchmark. It was something that the students had to have experience with before they took the test. And in the meantime, as I mentioned earlier, there really was no place to do it. They went from spare clinical rooms in freighters to rooms in children's, and there was no centralized place where they can do this. And they used handheld cameras to capture these evaluations. So again, back in 2003, the task force said, there's got to be a better way of doing this. And in the meantime, the simulation centers were slowly starting to pop up in different medical institutions around the country. So I could say with pride that MCW was one of the first. So summer 2003, they start this conversation. It was submitted to MCW Planning, and the dean, who was Dr. Dunn at the time, replied to the committee, go for it. So the way that this happened in March of 2004, on behalf of this task force, Dr. Simpson submitted a request for funding to Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin. And indeed, the name of the project was Start at the Stars, Standardized Teaching Assessment Resource Center. So,
in fact, this ties in. The Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin program was created through the Blue Cross conversion.
Yes.
And the goal of the funding, the endowment, was so that both the Medical College of Wisconsin and the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health would help improve the quality of health for the people of Wisconsin.
Yes.
And as it was identified, two of the key ways of doing this was through improved education and research. And so this was a perfect example of how an investment from that endowment was supporting education for the future.
Exactly, exactly. It was a wonderful fit. It was the perfect application for what this grant had intended. And on the part of the planners, you know, they did their due diligence. You know, they pulled together a budget. They weren't just pulling things out of air. They did some site visits to whatever existing simulation centers there were around the country at that time, which were not many, by the way. So with that, they made a very compelling case to HW that this center needed to be founded. So that happened in March 2004, and then it was approved, and we went forward. So really, the construction started in spring of 2005 and finished in the fall of 2005. So the whole July 2004 through spring of 2005 was engaging the architects, coming up with the design, working with numerous stakeholders among the faculty to help understand what the space needed to support, how it would be used, how it would be administered. So all that took place, and then in 2005, early summer, late spring, it broke ground and opened late winter of 2005.
And who were some of your early champions?
Well, in the anesthesiology department and emergency medicine, those were probably the primary users. So in the emergency medicine department, Dr. Matt Tews, joined the medical college fairly soon after the Star Center opened up, and was very innovative in terms of just envisioning how this technology can be used to benefit not just emergency medicine residents, but also medical students. So he really helped push the process a lot. Dr. Ed Callahan was in on some of these early meetings, and he, as a residency director at the time, helped push this initiative too. On the anesthesiology part, we had early on, Dr. Tatiana Strong worked with the clerkship and helped reshape that program so that our M3 students would be immersed in simulation earlier and in a more systematic and comprehensive way. And then from her, there's been other clerkship directors taken on. And probably one of the biggest players from the anesthesiology department is Dr. Yuda Navalia. So anesthesiology department considers her the simulation director for their own department. And so she's just a very close partner with us to help shape that residency program, oversee new initiatives, bring in externals. Like right now, we do a maintenance of certification for anesthesiology from anesthesiologists from around the country who come to be tested all day on Saturdays on their skills, keeping their skills current. And by the way, we beat UW in getting our MOCA certification. So, you know, just really good partners who's standing on their shoulders, and they kind of give us challenges of the next place we've got to grow. And I'd like to with pride say that I think we have accepted that challenge and continuing to push.
Some of the champions of the program have included Dr. Deb Simpson as well as Dr. Jose Franco. How did you interact with them, and what were their contributions?
Sure. So Dr. Simpson, as the Director of Educational Services, oversaw the standardized patient program before it came to the Star Center. And she was one of those people that worked very, very diligently in order to make this Star Center reality. So she's actually the one who made the HW request, did the application and all the groundwork for it. I mean, other people on the team too, but she was the forefront person with that. And when the standardized patient program eventually took its place in the Star Center, she still was a very integral person in making sure that the quality was maintained and that the program grew, and had pretty much hands-on effort in making that part of the program become what it is today. As far as Dr. Franco, he's my boss. So Dr. Franco is the director of the Office of Educational Improvement. And with some realignment, the Star Center, I think, rightfully now reports to him, because many of the work that office is being done is indeed part of our mission. So Dr. Franco is the director of the Star Center, my boss, and is kept well informed about the comings and goings of the various programs, and always advocates for us. Again, you know, we had, via Dr. Simpson, had a very well-established OSCE program long before the Star Center opened. The problem was there was no administratively convenient way to do it. It was clunky. It wasn't as comprehensive. It was a little piecemeal. So having the STAR Center allows us to provide this on a more standardized basis. But there was already a history there.
Now, when you go in the STAR Center, you will see Stan, you will see simulators that are, could represent women that are going through labor. You see models of the eyeball or the ear or an arm. Mm-hmm. How do you make the decision with limited resources or finite resources? How do you make the decision on what are the models, what are the simulators that are most appropriate? Do you have a team of faculty that help contribute to give feedback on what is it that we need?
Well, that's a really good question also. I do go to faculty. If we are considering a purchase, and it's not just which way the wind's blowing, going to simulation conferences and finding out, what are the trends, what's best practices now, what have other programs found very effective, and then I'll disseminate that information to our faculty and say, here's some consideration we're having for a purchase. Is this something that you'll find valuable? Is this something that will give us our ROI? Do you see yourself bringing your students and residents in to use this technology, or taking it out of this technology to use with your students? So I get feedback very actively from the faculty certainly before we make any big purchases. Probably one of the best examples is a year and a half ago, purchased something called the SonoSim. Very expensive technology, very mobile technology. And a lot of depth in terms of the curriculum support in so many different areas. So before we made the purchase, again, doing due diligence and putting it into faculty's hands and saying, preview this product. We think that you'll find this thing useful, but we really want to know, and then find ways of distributing it among you if indeed it is a valuable resource. And it's more than proven its value. It's being incorporated more and more. Medicine uses it, PM&R uses it, anesthesiology, emergency medicine, name a department, and now they're finding ways to incorporate it into not just medical student education, but resident education too. Mm-hmm. So case in point.
The technology continues to grow and change. Mm. And when you look at the technology that existed in 2006 and the technology that you see today, what are some of the most significant changes?
Well, the manufacturers are listening to users and trying to find ways of making them more user-friendly in terms of being able to program them. It used to be that when you ran the stand, there were multiple factors in pulmonary, respiratory. There were many different factors you had to use to be able to simulate the condition that you wanted to. Nowadays, it's more like one button for heart rate and things like that. So they're hearing from us that it needs to be made easier. But to get to that, they make the technology actually more complex, which leaves the potential for things breaking down. So on our part, what our simulation staff, and what I tell my staff, is that we need to make this turnkey for faculty. They don't need to come here and know what buttons to push. We just need to make sure it's operational, that they're not going to get any artifact on the EKG, that when the patient's breathing, we want to see the full respirations. And so we're constantly teching our equipment to make it work. So that's kind of added to our workload on the front end, to address your question a bit. But there's something else to bear in mind, and I tell this to every new faculty that comes in that has got questions about how simulation might work for their medical education needs, and that's we need to pick the right tool. We're not going to pick the $250,000 stand mannequin if they're teaching IV insertion, or if something could be done for maybe a table talk kind of scenario. The most important thing is to let the curriculum needs drive the simulator choice, and not the fact that we've got a fancy simulator drive the curriculum.
Very interesting. We talked about Deb Amos before as the person that is really leading the component for the standardized patients in the interactions with the students. Who is your point person on the simulator side that is helping to make sure that things operate efficiently there?
Right. And that's a biggie. Really, you need people with two different skill sets. That's why it's so tricky. You need people who have clinical knowledge, because they have to understand the application of the simulation, and you have to have people who have technical knowledge, able to understand if something's going wrong, what do I look at? And it's wonderful when you find this one person, and to some extent, we have people who understand both worlds. But I am blessed to have among the staff somebody who really understands the technology part very well. Our simulation engineer, Eric Griswold, who has a very broad base of technology background, and somebody who understands the clinical part of very well. That's Carrie Check, who's our simulation specialist. So basically, they're kind of two hemispheres of the brain that are used together to deliver the best simulation experience we can. And in addition to pushing the buttons and making sure everything's working, they also play the role of confederates during scenarios. So sometime one might be actually operating the simulator behind the one-way glass, the other one's on the other side of the glass in nurse garb, being the person who's passing the drugs, who's doing the recording of the code. So we have that kind of continuity by having a plant in the room.
Sure, sure.
So we call those confederates. Sometimes it's the faculty who play the role, but it just kind of points to the fact that there is a theatrical element in what we do, and that the person who do what we do in the Simulab have to have a very wide skill set.
Is there anyone else?
Well, we have 5 staff people currently in the STAR Center. We expect that our program, our support is going to grow as our program grows. Already we're kind of stretched. But I need to mention, too, our senior administrative assistant. Her name is Amy Kajir. She came from another department. She came with a lot of MCW experience, and she's been absolutely invaluable in kind of holding us all together. So what she does is she schedules, she bills, she troubleshoots, and keeps us all connected. So she has a wonderful skill set and just a beautiful team player, and so happy to have her supporting all of us and working side by side with her.
Now, and with the SimLab, you're able to make things go wrong.
Oh, yes.
And so when you're working with, and again, now maybe with the residents, paramedics, you were able to create a situation where maybe the medication didn't work. Maybe the patient is suddenly having a different health issue. How does that all work?
So when we have a group come in, we usually have a pre-designated scenario. Let's take anesthesia, for example. They'll come in on Thursday afternoons and Tuesday afternoons and typically have 3 scenarios that have been selected for them. And the scenario selection, because they know who's coming in, 3 residents, will be selected appropriately for that skill set for that person. What scenarios have they done before? Are they a senior resident? Can we push them a little bit? So those scenarios are already picked. So we work with the faculty, kind of designate how that will play out for them. But if, for example, in the course of a scenario, whether it's with a medical student or a resident, they don't make the typical choices, we go off script. So that's where having all the buttons helps. We may have expected that they're going to give amiodarone, but they give a different drug which has different consequences. Well, we have to be facile enough on the fly to be able to change that program in that scenario so that they would see what the real outcome of their real decision would be. And sometimes it's not pretty.
Now, when you look at the program, the changes that have occurred at MCW, in recent years we have grown tremendously, both geographically and programmatically. We have added campuses in Green Bay and in central Wisconsin to our medical education program, but we're one institution offering the same quality of education on all campuses. How do you ensure that the STAR centers that exist both in Wausau as well as in Green Bay, and the experience the students will have is going to match the experience that happens to students in Milwaukee?
Well, particularly when the Green Bay campus was being pulled together, I spent a lot of time up with the folks at Bellin and on that campus, just telling them what we deliver, what our expectations for our medical students were, via education with standardized patients or with simulators, and had to some extent educate the faculty up there too. So now they're off and running. Frankly, we've had a little less contact with the central campus, but I think that there's precedent out there, and when questions come, we respond to them.
Now, MCW has added new programs as well. We've created a master's program in anesthesiology assistance. We're going to be having a school of pharmacy here. There'll be other programs that come along. How does this impact the Star Center and the work that you'll do?
Tremendously. It has already.
Okay.
We had yesterday our first session, our first class for the Masters of Science Anesthesiology, the MSA students. So they came to our procedure room, and I had the airway heads out there for them, and they were learning how to do intubation. So this was the first time stepping through our doors. But the addition of that program alone will almost double the demand on our space resources, our equipment resources, and our staff time. So it's a challenge that we're trying to work through here. We have done Saturday events and late night events in the past. In fact, in November we've got 3 scheduled we've got 6 days a week scheduled, and then some late nights too. So that, since we staff it with 1.5 people, that becomes a challenge. So I know we've already talked with administration about growing our program to make sure that we're able to still do quality programming.
Well, and when we add pharmacology, will that be a different type of, will there be things that you need to add to the program that's
Yes.
different for pharmacology students?
And we've had a lot of conversations with our friends in pharmacy. They come through almost on a weekly basis, touring prospective faculty, touring prospective students, as did the MSA program. And what they've identified an area that they can use a simulation center, and they intend to use this a lot, is particularly the clinical skills rooms, as they're doing patient consult training. So that's another place where the OSCE, using the standardized patients, is really going to pay off. So I must say that to some extent the demand on the MSA program is different than pharmacy, so it gives us some capacity to grow into. Having said that, we know we still need more resources in order to support what we're doing. And not only that, but there's other programs too. Like, for example, now we're doing more interprofessional education. We've had a program, I think this will be the 4th year in April, running interprofessional education with multi-school of engineering nursing students and our medical students. IPE is growing like crazy, and again, the Star Center, with our standardized patients either in the center itself or in other venues around the campus, is being used to provide this opportunity for our medical students and our nursing students and other PA programs, physical therapy programs to practice together.
Well, in fact, in many respects, I maybe I'm incorrect, I view the Star Center in many ways the same as the medical library that we have here, in that it's a resource not only for the students, the residents, the fellows, the graduate students here at MCW, but it's something that's also improving the education for nursing students at other institutions, PA students, things like this, because they're the people in EMT training programs. They also use the Star Center, correct?
I love that library analogy. I really do. We also call it the sandbox.
Okay.
Where everybody can come and play. And yes, it's even though our mission initially was to the medical students, no doubt we are a much stronger program because of all the other constituencies that we serve. You were talking about emergency medicine, so that's a really good case in point. Flight for Life has been coming here for years, sometimes 4 to 6 times a month, to train all of their providers. And frankly, some of the things that we've had to learn to tailor the sessions for them are things that then we've been able to turn around and apply to resident education and medical student education and vice versa. So there's a lot of cross-pollination because of the fact that it's not just one constituency, but we have broad base of learners from a lot of different levels.
As you look back on the success of the Star Center over the years that you've been here, what are some of your proudest achievements, or some of the stories that you look back on and think, boy, this is why what we do is important?
Well, let's go back. I'll start with that IPE thing. So the first time that we did this, and we have scaled it up every year, we had medical students and nursing students talking together, and to my knowledge, there's never been anything like this before at the medical college. So an opportunity to treat a patient that they hold in common, side by side, to have those kind of collegial type of conversations, to change the construct that they used to view each other, so that the hierarchy can fall away, so that they can see each other as colleagues. I felt really proud that we could, bring that program, to have the first IP program there. But my goodness, you know, there's just been so much impact. We do grand rounds with emergency medicine and trauma surgery combined, and it kind of takes us, challenges to the nth degree of our technology, because it's in the discovery classroom, but we're running it downstairs, and there's so many things to coordinate, but very high fidelity scenarios that if anybody walks in, you can see that these people feel like they're immersed in a real world event. And I feel really proud of the fact that our team, again, we were given this challenge and we delivered. Yesterday, till about 8 o'clock at night, we had fourth-year medical students in. They used the STAR Center in this case not to work with standardized patients, but to use the technology of the STAR Center to practice their interviewing skills. Every fourth-year medical student is going to have an opportunity to have an interview one-on-one with one of our MCW faculty standing in as a prospective residency director at some program somewhere, and we tape these because of the technology. We have that capability. So then our medical students will have a chance to really improve their interviewing skills. They may be wonderful students, but maybe there's something in their delivery that needs polishing, and nobody's ever given them the opportunity. Because of the STAR Center, they now have that opportunity.
Oh, that's great. If someone were considering applying for a position at MCW, what advice would you give them?
I think working at the STAR Center is one of the most exciting things that you could consider, and just because of the variety, right? We get to interact with so many different departments. We're at the cutting edge of a technology. I feel like sometimes like I'm on a tsunami taking off because of how fast things are coming in. We have a good working team, and everybody recognizes that they bring different things to the table. There's just been a lot of foresight into what this can be, and just seeing that challenge it takes me aback a bit, but also reinvigorates me and to keep looking. So if I was coming into a position like this, and I saw all the investment that MCW did into our STAR Center, I'd say, here's an institution that really values innovation, values teaching excellence, values students, you know, and knows that they want to put into that student package the best skill that they can in terms of knowledge, in terms of communication skills, in terms of professionalism, and so much of that is trained at the STAR Center.
I've asked you a lot of questions. Is there anything we haven't touched on that we should?
I just want to thank all the champions who saw, had their crystal ball and saw this could be. Now, I think if they walked into this, if Dr. Campine walked to the STAR Center today, it's a different thing than he may have envisioned, because there have been so many changes that concurrently have pushed us along. But the fact that MCW in 2013 saw fit to give us a chance to renovate the space, give us some new spaces, add new technology to us, and reinvest in us, I'm grateful for that. And again, for the people who, back in the day, when there were hardly any SIM centers around the country, thought, you know what, we should do this at MCW.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
You know, I'm just very enthusiastic about what's coming in the future. I was on a website yesterday for simulators, and I saw what's in development, what's in the pipeline, and it's extraordinary. I would not be surprised if 10 years from now some of our mannequins don't have artificial intelligence. And the skin and the actual mannequin itself is even more realistic, to really, again, have that fidelity of experience so that all of our trainees don't have to do any pretending. You know, they can immediately go into their patient care delivery mindset.
Thank you. I appreciate all that you've done for MCW, Judy, and for making the STAR Center the success that it has.
My pleasure. It has been an honor and a privilege.
Great.